Hey, welcome back. I'm Steve. Today we're going to talk about antler restrictions and trophy management. Here's the biggest thing I want you to take away from it before I even get into it. A 3-point to a side antler restriction is not trophy deer management. In no shape, way, form, whatever. It is not trophy deer management. Well, now that we got to the punchline, let's start with the joke. Okay. States have started switching over to 3 points to a side. Why is that? And why does it not work a lot of times? Okay, you're in the state of Pennsylvania. You've just reduced the deer herd like crazy. Okay? Fewer deer than we've had in a generation. So what are you going to do? Well, now that you've got all these less deer, okay, what made sense at the time was we're going to put an antler restriction on the bucks. There's less deer, there's less reproducing, so we need to save some of the bucks. So somebody came up with the idea that if you put a 3-point to a side antler restriction on a good part of the state, that you're going to save about 50% of the bucks. 50% of the bucks. Make it to 2.5 years old. Well, I guess if you've never shot a 2.5-year-old deer, then hey, that's a much bigger deer than what you were shooting. But here's what happened. The bucks went through a little bit less stress during the rut. Remember, there was less does. They had to cover more ground and all that stuff. Biologists will worry about that, but it changed the mean conception date of the deer by 1 day. 1 day, okay? So did the bucks get a little bit of a break? Probably not. Okay. Next thing. All the people that said, "Oh, well, hey, I can't shoot a spike anymore. I'm not a trophy hunter." Well, if you call, a trophy any deer you want that's legal to shoot, well, you could still shoot legal deer, okay? So that's kind of beside the point. Now, what some states have found is that their good buck, okay, not necessarily super trophy potential, but their good buck population is going up. Here's the reason why. States like Pennsylvania and a few other, heavily pressured states have seen an increase in the bigger deer. Yay! Okay, wow. But it's not due to a 3-point on a side restriction. I'm sorry. That has very little, if anything, to do with it. The truth is, and the fact is, that there are way less hunters in Pennsylvania now than what we had. Probably about 45% less if I had to do some quick math in my head. Okay? 45% less hunters in the woods equals more deer that are going to survive. Therefore, more bucks making another year. More bucks that would have been 2.5-year-olds are now 3.5-year-olds and 4.5-year-olds. And it keeps going. The whole thing is, you didn't change anything. Okay? The only thing that you did was you reduced pressure. You reduced the overall hunting pressure and the overall amount of deer being killed. Okay? Now, let's take a state like any other of the Midwest states that's got a spike for illegal deer. Okay? They put out some big deer. Is it because their food is super fortified? Well, yeah, in a way. I mean, they do have a higher upper limit because, better dirt, better food, better minerals. It's like feeding a guy who lifts weights, steroids. They're going to get bigger. But you have to also realize they don't have the hunting pressure. Now, if you talk to somebody from a state out there, they'll tell you, oh yeah, we got hunting pressure. We got hunting pressure like you won't believe. Well, come and hunt one of the heavily hunted states and you'll find out what real hunting pressure is. Now, that's not to diss anybody, but it's the truth. I mean, have you ever pulled up to park at a spot to hunt and there's 20, 30 vehicles, 40 vehicles? I've seen it. A lot of other people in other states have seen it. Yeah, it's that much pressure. It's tough to fathom if you've never seen it. Okay. That's why you have a smaller size limit out there, but yet still have the big deer. It's a lack of hunters. Okay? Like I said, you might think that it's crowded. Okay? It's crowded for where you're at, but it's not crowded for where a lot of other people are. Now, let's get to the juicy stuff. Okay? You can do damage to a deer herd if all you do is you shoot the bucks with the better genetics. Well, in an area the size of a state, it is impossible through hunting to change the genetics in the state. That's right. The does have as much to do with the bucks as the fawns. You know, it's a combination. So it's really tough to, call genetics by shooting a doe or not shooting a doe. It's a crapshoot. Now, there is something out there called high grading, okay? High grading can be done in smaller areas with too big of an antler restriction. Let's say that you have an antler restriction of 4 points on one side. Let's say 3 up plus a brow tine, okay? 4 points to a side. Well, if those deer are taken out first, especially when they're younger because there's no protection for the younger exceptional deer, you can have a problem. You see, then you're going to have an inordinate amount of deer with 3 or less points to a side. That has happened. There was a study in the University of Mississippi. Yeah, University of Mississippi did a study. They had an area that was, I don't know whether it was fenced off or what it was, but yeah, it was poor soil, poor food, super heavy hunting pressure with a high amount of point restriction on a deer. And they saw evidence of high grading to where the deer's racks actually went smaller. So that is a possibility. So, to make it plain and simple, 3 point to a side antler restrictions are not trophy hunting. It cannot make an area trophy hunting. It's just not going to happen. And hey, if you've got decent soil, decent food for the deer, most of the deer that are 1.5 years are going to have 3 points to a side. I mean, at best, you can save 50% of them, and in the long run, it's not going to add up to much. Hey, for Real World Whitetail Hunter, I'm Steve.